Nearly 400 murders per 100,000 people every single year, more than in many active war zones. That was Medellin in 1991, the most dangerous city on Earth. Today, a cable car glides above that same city, connecting the poorest neighborhoods on the mountainside to the heart of the metropolis. In park libraries, kids from what used to be some of the most dangerous slums on Earth are learning to code. Urban planners from Tokyo, Copenhagen, and New York fly in just to study the model. How did a city built on a foundation of fear become a model for the world? The answer doesn't start with Pablo Escobar. It starts 70 years earlier, with a curse that has choked this country for generations. Colombia has more natural wealth than almost any other country in South America. Gold, emeralds, the finest coffee on the continent, soil so rich that almost anything will grow in it. That wealth never reached ordinary Colombians. It went to whoever held the guns and the power to control it. Economists call this the resource curse. Countries rich in natural resources often end up poorer and less stable than countries with none, because that wealth becomes a prize worth fighting a war over instead of a foundation for prosperity. On April the 9th, 1948, that rule explodes onto the streets of Bogotá. Jorge Eliezer Gaitan, a presidential candidate, a favorite of the poor, a man who promised to hand some of that wealth back to ordinary people, is shot dead by an assassin in the middle of the capital, in broad daylight. Within hours, the city is burning. Crowds destroy streetcars, set government buildings on fire, kill the suspected shooter on the spot. History will remember it as the Bogotazo. But what happens next is worse than one day of chaos. The Bogotazo ignites a civil war that will consume the next decade of Colombia. Conservatives against liberals, village against village, neighbor against neighbor. Land becomes a weapon again. Whoever controls the field controls survival. By the end of the 1950s, this period, which Colombians will simply call la violencia, the violence, will claim 200,000 lives, most of them civilians from rural areas, people who never carried a weapon, who were simply standing on the wrong land at the wrong time. The country emerges from that decade with a deep wound, but this isn't the end of the curse. It's only the first chapter, because in the 1970s, a new resource is about to appear on the horizon, one that will turn Colombia into a battlefield for the entire world. 1975, Medellin, Colombia's second largest city. Among thousands of small-time smugglers, one young man stands out, a man with an unfinished middle school education, but a head for numbers. Pablo Escobar doesn't start with cocaine. He starts with smuggling cigarettes, household appliances, and stolen cars. That's his training ground: logistics, bribery, fear as a working tool. At the same time, thousands of miles to the north, America discovers a new addiction. Cocaine becomes a status symbol on Wall Street in Hollywood, at middle-class parties. Demand explodes faster than anyone in Colombia can grasp. Escobar understands it first. The founding and formal consolidation of the Medellin cartel is usually dated to 1976 and 77, when previously loose smuggling networks join forces under his leadership. They don't invent the cocaine trade, they industrialize it. Their own labs in the jungle, their own smuggling routes, boats, small planes, eventually even their own hand-built airstrips, their own army of hired killers, sicarios, recruited from Medellin's poorest neighborhoods, boys for whom the promise of a motorcycle and money for their family is worth the willingness to kill. Within a few years, money flows on a scale Colombia has never seen. Escobar builds housing for the poor, funds soccer fields, becomes a kind of Robin Hood in the eyes of neighborhoods the state had ignored for decades. But the same hand that builds homes signs death warrants for judges, journalists, police officers, anyone standing in his way. Pablo Escobar first appears on Forbes magazine's list of the world's wealthiest people in 1987, his fortune estimated at $3 billion, placing him in the top 20 on the list. He stays on that list for 7 consecutive years until his death in 1993. At the height of his power in 1989, his fortune is valued at $25 billion, making him the 7th richest man on Earth. A man who started out smuggling cigarettes and stolen radios becomes richer than many governments. But wealth on this scale can't stay hidden from the state forever, and Escobar knows that sooner or later he'll have to choose: buy Colombia or destroy it trying. August 1989. Luis Carlos Galan, a presidential candidate, takes the stage at a campaign rally outside Bogotá. Galan has promised one thing: extraditing drug lords to the United States. For Escobar, that's a death sentence for his empire. An American prison means the end of control, the end of influence, the end of the life he's known. A gunman opens fire from the crowd. Galan is killed on the spot in front of thousands of people. This isn't a single act of violence. It's the opening of a war. Escobar declares war on the Colombian police and pays for it in cash. For killing an ordinary officer on the street, he offers $1,000 to $2,000. For officers and agents of the search block, the special unit created specifically to hunt him, $3,000 to $5,000. For high-ranking commanders, as much as $10,000 or more per head. The terror campaign runs mainly through 1989 and 1990. Judges refuse to rule on drug cases, knowing a guilty verdict means death for them or their families. Escobar names the strategy plainly: plata o plomo, silver or lead, a bribe or a bullet. There is no third option. November the 27th, 1989. Avianca Flight 203, a Boeing 727, takes off from Bogotá, 107 people on board. Escobar orders a bomb planted. His target is a presidential candidate he believes is on that flight. The man changes his ticket at the last minute. The plane explodes in mid-air over the town of Soacha anyway. Everyone on board is killed. The Colombian state, backed by the United States, finally moves with full force. But Escobar still holds one card. He negotiates the terms of his own surrender. In 1991, he builds, literally at his own expense, a prison called La Catedral, a luxury compound with a soccer field, a jacuzzi, a bar, guards he hires himself, a view of the mountains he once ruled as a free man. On July the 22nd, 1992, the government tries to move him to a real prison. Escobar escapes that same night. The largest manhunt in Colombian history begins. The search block tracks him for 499 days from city to city, from safe house to safe house. On December the 2nd, 1993, on a rooftop in Medellin, just blocks from the neighborhood where he grew up, officers corner him mid-escape. Escobar dies in a shootout. He is 44 years old. The city he built and destroyed at the same time erupts in celebration on the streets. But the war he started doesn't die with him. December 1993. Escobar has been dead only hours and already there's no power vacuum in Colombia. The Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, until then quiet rivals of Escobar's from the city of Cali, take over the market almost without firing a shot. Their method is the opposite of Escobar's. No bombings, no war with the state. They bribe quietly, politicians, judges, even parts of the security apparatus. The press calls them the gentlemen of Cali, men in suits running a drug empire like a corporation. But the cocaine war is only one layer of Colombia's conflict. Beneath it, for decades, another war has been running. FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, forms all the way back in 1964, a peasant guerrilla movement inspired by communist ideology. Through the 70s and 80s, they remain on the margins. Cocaine changes that. FARC begins taxing coca crops in the territory it controls, and later moves into production and trafficking itself. An ideological guerrilla army turns into one of the wealthiest armed organizations on earth. In response to FARC, paramilitary groups emerge, armed militias, formally defending landowners and businesses from the guerrillas, but in practice, running their own terror campaign against civilians suspected of leftist sympathies. In 1997, they unite under a single structure, the AUC, the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia. By the 1990s, Colombia is no longer a state fighting one cartel. It's a triangle of violence: the government, leftist guerrillas, and right-wing militias, all three sides, to varying degrees, funded by the same resource that has cursed this country for decades. The United States watches with growing concern, not just for moral reasons, but because cocaine keeps flowing straight onto American streets. In the year 2000, Washington launches Plan Colombia, a multi-billion-dollar package of military and counter-narcotics aid, meant to strengthen the Colombian state enough to fight a war on all three fronts at once. It's the beginning of the longest chapter of Colombia's war, one that will last nearly 2 more decades. For more than 50 years, FARC and the Colombian state fight a war that claims, by various estimates, several 100,000 lives. Millions more are forced from their homes. November the 19th, 2012. In Havana, President Juan Manuel Santos opens official peace negotiations with FARC, far from the Colombian mountains where the war has raged for generations. 4 years of talks follow. Hundreds of hours spent negotiating disarmament, justice for victims, and the reintegration of fighters back into society. September 2016. Santos and the FARC leader known as Timochenko sign a historic peace agreement. A month later, Colombians vote on it in a referendum and, to the world's surprise, narrowly reject the first version of the deal. The country is deeply divided. Many believe the terms are too lenient toward those responsible for decades of violence. Santos doesn't give up. He renegotiates the key terms and pushes the agreement through Congress instead of holding another referendum. That December, he's awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, granted, as the Nobel Committee makes clear, despite the failed referendum, in recognition of the effort itself to end the longest-running armed conflict in the Western Hemisphere. Thousands of FARC fighters lay down their weapons. The organization formally becomes a political party. But peace on paper doesn't mean peace on the ground. Where FARC withdraws, a vacuum appears, and nature abhors a vacuum just as much as politics does. Other armed groups, FARC dissidents who rejected the deal, and new cartels, move into the abandoned territory, taking over coca crops and smuggling routes. For many rural regions of Colombia, the war never truly ended, it just changed its face. But in the cities, far from those still troubled regions, something else is happening. Something no one could have predicted 30 years earlier, when Medellin carried the title of the most dangerous city on earth. The early 2000s. Medellin still carries the weight of its reputation. A city that was, for a decade, synonymous with fear, now tries to answer a question no one had asked at this scale before. How do you rebuild a society torn apart by war, where an entire generation grew up knowing violence as its only language? The answer the city finds isn't another police crackdown. It's architectural. Medellin's poorest neighborhoods sit on the steep mountainsides ringing the city, physically cut off from downtown, where the schools, the jobs, the hospitals are. That geographic isolation had fed crime for decades. No access to the city, no access to a future. In 2004, the city opens its first metro cable line, a cable car system built not for tourists, but for residents of the poorest barrios. For the first time, the trip from home to downtown drops from 2 hours to 20 minutes. But transportation is only the beginning. Where the cable car lines end, the city builds something even more symbolic: park libraries. Massive modern buildings, designed by renowned architects, placed in exactly the neighborhoods once ruled by the cartels. Places where kids whose parents grew up in the shadow of the drug war learn to read, to code, to play music. The results are measurable. Medellin's murder rate falls from nearly 400 per 100,000 residents in 1991 to somewhere between 10 and 13 in the following decades, a drop of more than 95%. For comparison, today, Medellin's rate is more than twice as low as the national average for all of Colombia, which hovers around 25.5 murders per 100,000 people. The city once known as the most dangerous on earth is now safer than the country it sits in. In 2013, Medellin wins the Innovative City of the Year award, granted by the Wall Street Journal and the Urban Land Institute, beating out finalists New York City and Tel Aviv. This isn't a story about Colombia solving all its problems. Rural regions are still fighting new cartels. Inequality still divides the country. The resource curse that sparked the Bogotazo 70 years earlier hasn't disappeared. But Medellin proves something no drug war ever could: that a city built on a foundation of fear can rebuild itself around something else entirely. Not force, architecture, education, a decision to invest in people instead of prison walls. The cable car still glides above the city today, but what it carries now isn't just commuters heading to work. It's proof that even the deepest curse can be rewritten.